This whole thing's a joke. Take the money and clear my calendar. One wrong word from that delivery guy and it's perjury.
I've been sitting on this bench for over 40 years. I've watched thousands of souls walk through those double doors. Some come in with their shoulders high, ready to fight. Some come in with their eyes low, carrying the weight of the world. I've seen men shaking so bad they can't hold a pen, and I've seen mothers praying in the back row. But there is one specific type of person I cannot stand. It's the person who walks in here thinking, my courtroom is their personal playground. They think the law is just a suggestion, something that applies to other people, but never to them. It happened on a Tuesday, April 14th, in Providence, Rhode Island. The morning docket was heavy, the air was stale, and my clerk called case number 2TR 61804. I remember looking at the clock. It was exactly 10:47 a.m. Not because I'm obsessed with time, but because that was the minute the entire energy in the room shifted. On paper, the file looked simple. A hit and run, property damage, no injuries listed, a defendant with a lawyer, and a witness. Standard procedure. But I've learned something in 4 decades. Whenever a defendant walks in dressed like he's heading to a Fashion Week after party, the case is never simple. The defendant's name was Chase Whitmore, 28 years old. He didn't walk to the defense table. He strutted. His haircut was so sharp, it looked like it was measured with a laser level. His teeth were white like a billboard advertisement. He was wearing a black Balenciaga hoodie, the kind that looks simple, but probably cost more than my first car. And on his wrist sat a Rolex Daytona, stainless steel, catching the courtroom lights and flashing them into the gallery like a distress signal for attention. He didn't look like a man facing consequences. He looked like a man attending a minor inconvenience. Behind him, his attorney was whispering, "Chase, please, just sit down." But Chase waved him off like a servant, the kind of dismissive wave you give when words are too expensive to waste on the help. And then he did it. The moment that made me tighten my grip on the gavel, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Not just any keys, Lamborghini keys, with the golden bull emblem on the fob. He didn't put them in his pocket. He tossed them onto the defense table. Clack. He set them right there, center stage, like a trophy. Like he wanted the court to know exactly who he was and what he drove. He sat back, draped his arm over the chair, and sighed loudly, checking the courtroom ceiling like he was bored. Then I looked at the other side of the aisle. The victim, her name was Elena Marquez, 36 years old, a nurse at Rhode Island Hospital. She works 1-2-hour shifts, mostly nights. She stood there wearing plain blue scrubs under a faded winter coat that had seen too many winters. She was holding a manila folder with both hands, clutching it to her chest like it was the only thing holding her life together. Her shoes were worn at the toe, not dirty, just tired. Just like her, she didn't have an entourage. She didn't have a designer bag. She wore a small silver cross around her neck and had the kind of face that tries to be polite even when it's exhausted. The contrast between them was enough to make you sick. On one side, a boy treating the law like a joke, flashing wealth as a weapon. On the other, a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in a week, just trying to get her car fixed so she could get back to saving lives. I asked her, "Miss Marquez, are you here as the complaining witness?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was soft but steady. That's a special kind of strength, not loud, just present. She began to tell me what happened. March 2nd, 10:47 p.m. She had just finished a shift and parked her 2012 Honda Civic on Atwells Avenue to run into a pharmacy. She needed asthma medicine for her son, Mateo. 2 inhalers, 1 rescue, 1 daily. The cost, $386 after insurance. She remembered the exact dollar amount because for her, that wasn't just money, that was survival. As she walked out of the store, bag in hand, she saw her car lurch forward violently. Crunch, the sound of metal screaming against metal. A bright green Lamborghini Urus, loud as thunder, had tried to force its way into a spot that didn't exist. It clipped her rear bumper, shattered her taillight, and jumped the curb. Instead of stopping, instead of checking to see if anyone was hurt, the driver gunned the engine. The Lamborghini roared, swerved around her broken car, and sped off into the night. Elena ran after it, not thinking about safety, just thinking about how she couldn't afford a repair deductible and her son's medicine in the same week. She watched the taillights disappear, but she wasn't alone. There was a witness, and that witness was the only reason Chase Whitmore was sitting in front of me today, smirking at the ceiling. The assistant district attorney that morning was a man named Leonard Pike. He wasn't the elected district attorney, but he certainly walked around like he owned the building. Crisp navy suit, perfect Windsor knot, and the kind of fast, aggressive walk that screams impatience. I've worked with hundreds of prosecutors over the years. Most of them are good people trying to keep the streets safe, but every now and then, you get one who forgets that his job is to do justice, not just to rack up wins for his batting average. Pike was one of those. He didn't look at the victim, he looked at the scoreboard. Pike called the witness to the stand. His name was Darius Cole. He was 24 years old, a driver for a local food delivery service. He walked to the stand wearing his work uniform, smelling faintly of rain and takeout food. He testified that he was sitting at the red light in his blue Toyota Corolla when it happened. He saw the crash. He saw the bright green SUV. He saw the driver's face in the glow of the street lamp when Chase stepped out for a split second to check his own bumper before speeding off. Darius pointed a shaking finger across the room and said, "That's him. That's the guy." Chase Whitmore didn't even blink. He just smiled that same smug, untouchable smile and looked at Darius like he was looking at an insect on his windshield. And then Ada Pike did something that I still think about to this day. Instead of letting the witness tell his story, Pike leaned in. He didn't start a cross-examination. He started a hunt. His voice dropped an octave, becoming cold and sharp. He asked Darius, "Mr. Cole, you deliver food, correct? So you're used to being out late at night? You're used to being around trouble?" Darius blinked, confused by the aggression coming from the man who was supposed to be on his side. He said, "I'm just used to working, sir." Pike nodded dismissively, like the answer didn't matter. Then he pulled a piece of paper from his file. "And you have a prior contact with the police, don't you? A disorderly conduct charge from 2019. Darius looked terrified. He stammered, That was a mistake at a party years ago. I paid the fine. It was dismissed." Pike leaned closer, invading the witness's personal space. "A mistake? Sure. Now, tell me, Mr. Cole, are you absolutely certain you want to accuse a prominent man like Mr. Whitmore today? Because if you're wrong, if you're lying, that is perjury. That is a felony. That is a charge that will follow you for the rest of your life and ensure you never get a better job than the one you have now." The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the lights. Elena's hands tightened on her folder until her knuckles turned white. I saw Darius's throat move as he swallowed a lump of pure fear. This wasn't testing credibility. This was intimidation disguised as procedure. It was a bully in a suit using the weight of the law to crush a man who didn't speak the language of the court. Chase Whitmore's smile got bigger, like he was watching a favorite movie scene. I felt the heat rise in my chest. I said, "Mr. Pike." He kept going, ignoring me, eyes locked on Darius. "Because you understand, Mr. Cole, if I find out you're lying, I can recommend charges against you right now." I didn't wait another second. I slammed my hand on the bench. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Mr. Pike, stop." He paused, looking at me with genuine surprise, like he forgot there was a judge in the room. I leaned forward until I was staring right into his eyes. "Step back from the witness." He hesitated. "Your Honor, I'm simply advising him of the—" I cut him off. "No, you are not advising. You are intimidating. You are bullying a witness in my courtroom." He opened his mouth to argue, and I raised a finger. "One more word, Mr. Pike, and you will be explaining yourself to the ethics board in writing. Step back." He stepped back, fixing his jacket, his face tight with anger. The air in the room felt thin. I turned to Darius. He looked like he wanted to run out the back door. I softened my voice. "Mr. Cole, look at me. Don't look at him. Look at me." He turned his eyes toward the bench, wide and fearful. I said, "You are under oath. Your only job is to tell the truth. That is it. My job is to make sure you can tell it without being bullied by anyone, regardless of what suit they are wearing." Pike tried to speak again. "Your Honor, the credibility of the witness is I didn't let him finish. The credibility of this entire proceeding is at stake, counsel, and you are treading on very thin ice. I looked over at Chase Whitmore. He was actually laughing, a quiet, breathy laugh, not loud enough for the record, but loud enough for me. I looked at him. Mr. Whitmore, do you find something funny? He shrugged, leaning back in his chair, playing with those Lamborghini keys again. I just think this is dramatic, Judge. It's a traffic court. You guys are acting like it's the trial of the century. That word, dramatic. Like Elena's broken car, her son's missing medicine, and Darius's fear were all just a performance for his amusement. I turned back to the evidence. Officer Riley took the stand next. He submitted photographs. They were clear, high-definition images of green paint transfer on Elena's bumper, the unique honeycomb pattern of the Lamborghini's front grille imprinted on her car, debris from a cracked carbon fiber lip left at the scene. The report listed the estimated damage to Elena's car at $1,746. To Chase Whitmore, that was lunch money. To Elena, that was a mountain she couldn't climb. Officer Riley continued his testimony, and the evidence started to pile up like a mountain Chase Whitmore couldn't climb. The officer presented a tow yard intake log dated March 3rd at 2:23 a.m. Chase's green Lamborghini had been brought in with fresh front-end damage. The intake photos showed new scrape marks and a cracked bumper that perfectly matched the debris found at the scene of Elena's hit Honda. Chase's lawyer started shifting in his seat, leaning over to whisper frantically. Pike, trying to regain his footing after I shut him down, stood up and argued, "Your Honor, vehicles can be damaged in many ways. This doesn't prove my client was behind the wheel." I looked Pike dead in the eye and said, "Counsel, coincidences don't pay rent, and they don't fix shattered taillights." Zai. Elena looked like she wanted to cry, but she wouldn't let herself. She sat with her chin up, radiating a quiet dignity that all of Chase's money couldn't buy. Then, Officer Riley brought out the traffic camera footage. It wasn't a Hollywood movie. The resolution was grainy. It captured that neon green SUV running a red light at 10:49 p.m. Just 2 minutes after the crash. The speed was estimated at 55 miles per hour in a 5-mile-per-hour zone. Pike, still acting as Chase's unofficial defense, asked, "Can you state with certainty that Mr. Whitmore was the driver from this blurry footage?" The officer admitted he couldn't. Chase smirked again, leaning over to his lawyer with a look that said, "I told you I'd get away with it." His lawyer stood up, smelling blood in the water. "Your Honor, we move for immediate dismissal due to a total lack of identification." The room went cold. Darius Cole looked defeated, and Elena stared at her worn-out shoes. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Chase, sitting there like he was untouchable. I said, "Motion denied." The smirk faded for half a second, replaced by a flash of irritation. Chase stood up without permission, ignoring every rule of decorum. "Judge, with all due respect, this is ridiculous. I have a multi-million-dollar company to run. I can't be here all day because some delivery guy thinks he saw a car." I felt that old heat in my chest, righteous anger. My father wasn't a judge. He was a working man who taught me that power exists to protect people, not to crush them. I told Chase to sit down until I recognized him. He sat, but he rolled his eyes like a spoiled teenager. And then the entire case took a turn that nobody, not Pike, not the lawyer, and certainly not Chase, saw coming. It didn't come from my bench, and it didn't come from the police report. It came from Elena's folder. She raised a shaking hand and asked, "Your Honor, may I say something?" She took out her phone. "My cousin told me to look online," she said. Chase's posture changed from boredom to sharp irritation. Elena continued, "I found his Instagram. It's public. I asked Chase if he had a public account, and he shrugged. Everyone does." Elena read the username out loud. "I Chase Whitmore official." She told the court that on March 2nd at 11:03 p.m., less than 20 minutes after she was left standing on the curb, Chase had posted a story. Pike jumped up. "Your Honor, social media content must be authenticated." I raised my hand to silence him. "We will address authentication in a moment. Let her speak." Elena turned the phone toward the clerk. and we projected the image onto the courtroom screen. The image popped up, and the room went silent. It was a video shot from the driver's seat of a bright green dashboard. The Lamborghini Bull logo was right there on the steering wheel. Music was blasting so loud you could almost feel the bass through the screen. The speedometer was visible for a split second, 72 miles per hour. But it was the caption that made my stomach turn. Written in white text over the video, it said, "Providence roads are my runway." Elena scrolled to the next story. It was a selfie video. You could see Chase's face clearly, illuminated by the dash lights. He was laughing. He looked into the camera and said, "Some broke car tried to kiss my bumper. I'm out." Then he made a kissing sound toward the lens. The final part of the video was what broke the silence in the room. Chase sneered at the camera and said, "If you can't afford repairs, don't park near rich people." Elena's eyes watered, but she didn't break. She stood there with more courage in her tired hands than Chase Whitmore had in his entire designer existence. Chase's lawyer turned pale. Pike looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. The evidence hadn't just caught up to Chase, it had run him over. The courtroom was dead silent after that Instagram video played. Chase sat there with the blood drained from his face, while Elena finally seemed to take a breath for the first time all morning. Just as the defense lawyer was opening his mouth to try and pivot, the heavy oak doors at the back of the gallery swung open with a purposeful thud. Two individuals walked in. They weren't wearing court uniforms or cheap suits. They wore dark, understated clothing and moved with the kind of steady calm that only comes from having real authority. Zai. One of them stepped forward and handed a card to my clerk, who looked at it and immediately passed it up to me. It was Special Agent Mara Hines, federal badge displayed. I looked down from the bench and asked the purpose of their presence in a municipal traffic court. Agent Hines didn't blink. She stated clearly that they were there regarding Mr. Chase Whitmore and a pending federal matter. She explained that they had been monitoring this very proceeding because the witness intimidation we had just witnessed intersected with an ongoing federal investigation. Chase Whitmore's smirk disappeared so fast it was like someone had physically slapped it off his face. He half stood, looking like he wanted to run, but his legs seemed to stop listening to him, and he sank back into his chair. His high-priced lawyer requested a sidebar, but the agent shook her head. She informed the court that the warrant was already signed. She announced that Mr. Whitmore was under investigation for insurance fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction. Then, the agent turned her gaze toward Leonard Pike, our assistant district attorney. She noted that they had recovered evidence of coordinated social media harassment targeting witnesses in prior incidents, including actions that had occurred in this courtroom today. Pike's face turned a dusty shade of gray. The fast-talking, crisp confidence he had used to bully Darius Cole was completely gone. He sat down like the air had been let out of his body. I looked at Pike slowly and asked him if he really believed my courtroom was a place where he could operate without eyes watching him. He started to stammer, trying to say he was only advising the witness, but I told him to save it. I told him he could explain himself to his supervisor and the ethics board in writing. This wasn't just a traffic case anymore. This was an exposure of a character and a system that thought money could buy silence. Chase Whitmore looked at his Lamborghini keys on the table, and for the first time, they didn't look like a trophy. They looked like a weight pulling him under. Agent Hines didn't just bring a warrant. She brought receipts. She produced printed screenshots with precise timestamps from the night of March 2nd. While Elena was standing in the cold, trying to figure out how to fix her car, Chase had been busy. A Snapchat post from 12:14 a.m. showed a photo of Elena's damaged bumper with the text "broke vibes" plastered over it. Attached to that post was a link to a private group chat. Jason, the agent explained to the court that this private group was where Chase and his associates mocked and doxed witnesses in multiple cases. They used these chats to coordinate harassment and pressure people into changing their testimony. Chase's lawyer put both hands on the defense table like he was trying to keep the room from spinning. Chase finally spoke, but the swagger was gone. His voice was small as he muttered, "This is insane. I didn't do that." Agent Hines didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "We have your device ID, we have your IP logs, and we have the messages." Those words, IP logs and device IDs, sounded like a foreign language to Chase, but I knew exactly what they meant. It meant the digital footprint was permanent. It meant there was no way to delete his way out of this one. I looked at Chase Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, you thought this was a joke, I said. You thought this was just a traffic court where a nurse and a delivery driver were easy targets. He swallowed hard, staring at the floor. I continued. You thought you could insult this bench because you believe your net worth is your rank in society. Now, I don't control federal charges, but I do control the integrity of this courtroom. And I control what happens when someone tries to terrorize a witness under my roof. I turned back to Darius Cole, the delivery driver who had been threatened by the prosecutor earlier. Mr. Cole, I asked softly, did you feel threatened by what Mr. Pike said to you today? Darius hesitated for a second, then nodded. Yes, Your Honor, he said. I did. I looked at Leonard Pike one last time. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire career vanish in a single morning. I told the room that when I took this job, I swore to protect the integrity of the law. That means a witness must be able to tell the truth without being treated like a criminal for doing the right thing. Chase's lawyer stood up, his voice trembling as he requested a stay in light of the federal involvement. I didn't even let him finish the sentence. Motion denied, I said. We will proceed on exactly what is before this court right now. Agent Hines stood in the back, arms crossed, her presence validating everything my gut had felt the moment Chase Whitmore walked in. Justice was no longer a theory in the room, it was a looming reality. The air in the courtroom felt heavy with the weight of consequence. I looked at Chase Whitmore, whose expensive designer hoodie now looked like a costume that didn't fit anymore. He was no longer the untouchable heir to a capital holdings firm. He was a defendant caught in a web of his own making. But before I passed my judgment, I turned my attention to Elena Marquez. This woman had spent her morning being mocked and ignored, yet she held more power in her silence than Chase had ever bought with his credit cards. I asked her, Miss Marquez, what would help you most right now? Most people in her position would ask for blood. They would want to see the person who hurt them crushed. But Elena didn't ask for revenge. She looked at Chase with tired, steady eyes and said, I just want my car repaired, and I want him to stop. I don't want him to do this to someone else. That is the language of a good person. They don't ask for destruction, they ask for safety and respect. It was a request for balance in a world that Chase Whitmore had tried to keep tilted in his favor. I turned back to the bench and made the sentence hurt where it needed to hurt. Justice isn't just a fine paid to the state. It's the restoration of what was broken. I ordered full restitution for the repair of Elena's car, every cent of that $1,700 due within 30 days. And I ordered it paid directly to Elena Marquez, not to the court. But I wasn't finished. Chase's behavior in my courtroom, his sneering remarks about clipping coupons, and his blatant intimidation of witnesses required a different kind of lesson. I found him in contempt of court. I imposed the maximum fine allowed, but I knew money wasn't the answer for a boy who thought wealth was a shield against morality. I leaned forward and told him, Mr. Whitmore, you believe money is your rank. You believe you are above the people who keep this city running. I sentenced him to 200 hours of community service, but not the kind where he could write a check to get out of it. I ordered him to complete his service at Rhode Island Hospital in the Patient Transport and Facility Support Unit. He would report 2 nights a week from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. for 25 weeks. I told him, you will wear plain scrubs, no designer logos, no Rolex, no Gucci belt. He would spend his time helping the very people he had mocked, people like Elena, who work until their shoes are worn and their bones ache. Chase looked up, his face twisting in a mix of fear and disbelief. That's not fair, he stammered. I told him it was the only thing in his life that actually was. The air in the room felt like it had been sucked out of a vacuum. Chase Whitmore sat there, his mouth open, looking at his expensive Lamborghini keys, as if they were suddenly made of lead. I wasn't done with him yet. I told him that he would also be required to attend a victim impact class and a social media ethics program approved by the probation department. I warned him that any online posts about this case, any mention of the witnesses, or any harassment of any kind would result in me remanding him to custody immediately. That was the moment the reality hit him like a physical wall. His face twisted. It wasn't a smug look anymore, it was pure, unadulterated fear. But the real blow came from the back of the room. Agent Hines stepped forward and addressed the court once more. She informed Mr. Whitmore that he was to come with them immediately following this proceeding to be processed on the federal warrant. I watched as Chase's shoulders dropped. His expensive hoodie, which he had worn like a suit of armor, suddenly looked like a costume that didn't fit a man of his stature or lack thereof. And Leonard Pike, the prosecutor who thought he was untouchable, sat down as if the life had left his body. He realized in that moment that threats don't just hurt the witness, they poison the entire system of justice. Before we closed the record, I wanted to make sure the message was clear to everyone watching. I looked at Elena Marquez and Darius Cole. I told them that the courtroom should be the one place where the truth is safe. I told them that as long as I am on this bench, I will step between the witness and the threat. Chase turned toward Elena as the officers approached to take him into custody. His voice cracked as he asked if they could just settle, offering to pay whatever it took. Elena looked at him with those tired eyes, the eyes of a woman who had worked all night to keep others alive, and she said something that landed heavier than any sentence I could ever give. She told him, "I didn't want your money. I wanted you to stop acting like we don't matter." As they led him away, those Lamborghini keys were still sitting on the table, shiny, expensive, and completely useless. They were a small symbol of how fast the world can flip when the truth finally shows up with receipts. I stayed on the bench for a few minutes after the officers led Chase Whitmore out in handcuffs. I watched Elena gather her folder, her hands finally steady. I watched Darius exhale a breath he had been holding for over an hour. I watched my clerk finalize the orders that would change the trajectory of Chase's life and, hopefully, Leonard Pike's career. After 40 years of doing this, I can tell you something very simple. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about balance. It's about telling the strong and the wealthy that they do not get to crush people just because they have the means to do so. And it's about telling the scared and the vulnerable, you are safe here. My father used to tell me, "Frank, your name and your integrity are all you truly have." Chase Whitmore had the cars, he had the designer clothes, and he had the millions in the bank. But that day, in a small municipal courtroom in Providence, he was completely bankrupt where it mattered most. He had no character, no respect, and eventually, no freedom. I want you to remember this story the next time you see power trying to silence the truth. The law is not supposed to be a weapon for the wealthy to wield against the poor. It is supposed to be a shield for everyone. The moment we allow threats to silence a witness, we stop being a court of law and we become a stage for bullies. So, here is my message to you. If you ever have to stand up and tell the truth in a room where power is trying to scare you, stand firm. There are still people in this world, and judges on this bench, who will step between you and the threat. I will, and so will anyone who remembers why this black robe actually matters. Thank you for staying with me through this case. It's a reminder that no matter how bright the green paint on the Lamborghini is, it can't hide the truth once the light of justice hits it. If you believe that the courtroom should be a place where the truth is always protected, leave a comment below saying "protect the witness," so we can show the world that justice isn't a trend, it's a duty. If you want to hear about the next case, the one where a man tried to bribe his way out of a felony only to expose his own secret on the record, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'll be here to tell you exactly how it ended. Until next time, keep the faith and keep the truth safe.